All right, welcome to the Turks. Jake Ugranica sparing with you guys. All right, Donald Trump going down for the third time, the 4th to 18th time. Well, we'll see how it turns out, right? Well, but we do have news on that, we do. And then progressives in Congress are doing something. We're gonna debate it a little bit. Is it just theatrics or is it positive movement forward?
And I can't even believe that's gonna be a debate, but okay.
No, it is gonna be a debate.
Okay.
It is. And then speaking of debates, they're having a debate in the right-wing community over trad wives. If you don't know what a trad wife is, first of all, super awkwardly named. We will tell you later, and then we'll tell you what the kerfuffle's about, and I think you'll be deeply amused. Okay.
We begin with serious news, though.
Yes.
So there is some international news I wanted to talk about today. Let's get to it.
I think Israel is a democracy, will remain a democracy. I think it'll be a stronger democracy after some of these reforms are met. People don't understand democracies. They don't understand that France can have these divisions, that the US can have these divisions, that Israel has these divisions. But the strength of democracy is that we voice these divisions, we protest, but ultimately we make important democratic decisions, and that'll be the case in Israel as well.
Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu from Israel, of course, is now trying to defend the decision to weaken Israel's judiciary system. In fact, this was a decision passed by lawmakers in Israel this week, and it has sparked mass protests, including protests from members of the military. We'll get to those details in just a moment. But first, a few details about what has been done to the political system in Israel, what the fallout is, and what we could expect in the future. So, before we continue, it's really important to understand that unlike the United States, the Israeli government does not have a constitution. So when it comes to their judges, they do have a system of checks and balances. The judges are able to decide on whether or not the actions of the lawmakers are reasonable or unreasonable. So they don't base their decisions on constitutionality because they do not have a constitution the same way the United States does. Now, the bill in question here that passed on July 24th significantly limits the Supreme Court's oversight of government actions and policies and ends the court's ability to strike down government decisions and appointments on the basis of reasonability. So again, the whole point here, what they're doing, the lawmakers under the leadership of Prime Minister Netanyahu, is they are weakening their system of checks and balances, weakening the judiciary in the country so they can essentially go forward unchecked. Go ahead, Jake.
Yeah, so it's even made worse by the fact that it's a parliamentary system. So once the ruling party has a majority in parliament, as Netanyahu's does, and they appoint the prime minister, if there is no judicial check at all, so unreasonable is the equivalent of unconstitutional in our system. So now the judiciary cannot rule anything unreasonable that the prime minister does or parliament does. So then that judiciary becomes totally irrelevant politically. So that means that whatever Netanyahu says and gets his party to agree to in parliament, it's over. That's the law of the land. So they can basically do anything they want. The unreasonable standard was to check for minority rights and to make sure that they were following the democratic principles of not just majority rule, but minority rights and protections of human rights, etc. And now those things do not exist anymore. So whatever Netanyahu says becomes the law of the land in Israel. That's what people are concerned about. Honestly, that little piece that you saw there, I thought Stephanopoulos did an awful interview. He did not explain that, and he never asked him about that. And it was just propaganda for Netanyahu. It was pretty gross.
We're gonna have a few other examples of that in just a moment, but I do want to also talk a little bit about the protests. The protests have been ongoing for months to the lead up of the passage of this legislation, to the passage of weakening the judicial system in Israel. And after the lawmakers passed the legislation on Monday of this week, the protests really did explode even further. So last week, by the way, there were members of the military in Israel who said, we are not going to participate in the military as a form of protest. And so last week, 1,142 Air Force reservists announced they would end their volunteer duty in protest of Benjamin Netanyahu's attempt to overhaul the judiciary. Among them is Lieutenant Colonel N. His name is obviously not N, but that's what he would like to go by. Who was asked? He was asked to be only referred by his rank, and here's what he told NBC News. I came to the conclusion that this government is the biggest danger that Israel faces right now, more than any external enemy or threat, be it Iran, Hezbollah, anyone out there. Since I don't believe in violence inside Israel, the only option that I was left with is to stop serving in reserve because I don't want to serve a dictatorship. And despite that public outcry, Netanyahu absolutely insists that these changes are not gonna weaken Israel's democracy, but rather strengthen it. And here's a little piece of that propaganda in the interview that Cenk was referencing right here.
I think we have to bring back Israeli democracy in line with what is common to all democracies. The essence of democracy is the balance between the will of the majority and the rights of the minority. And that's achieved by the balance between the three branches of government. That's been taken off the rails in Israel in the last 20 years because we have the most activist judicial court on the planet. And it's arrogated for itself powers from the government, from the executive, and the legislative branches. So we're trying to correct it, but I want to bring the pendulum to the middle. I don't want to bring the pendulum to the other side. There's a middle ground there, and I hope we can achieve it. But that's why we're doing it. Imagine that in the United States, the Supreme Court could tell the executive, the president, okay, that we are nullifying any one of your decisions just based on something that we think is unreasonable. You would not accept it, we don't accept it, but we have to correct it, and that's what we just did. It's a minor correction. It's described as the end of Israeli democracy. I think that's silly, and when the dust settles, everybody will see it.
Now keep in mind that Benjamin Netanyahu leads a right-wing government in Israel right now. He is a right-wing politician and is also facing some pretty serious bribery and corruption charges. So the timing here is pretty convenient for Netanyahu. But Cenk, I don't know, maybe I'm being unfair. Do you believe him? Do you think that he's just trying to get the pendulum to swing to the middle?
Look, Netanyahu's allowed to do any propaganda he likes for himself. But it's Stephanopoulos' job to check him. He had 4 outrageous things right there. First of all, he's like, imagine if in America, the president or the legislative branch was overruled by the Supreme Court. Yeah, I can imagine that because it happens all the time. Like that's our system of government, and that was your system of government until you just destroyed it. He's like, look, we're just trying to look for balance. No, you're not. You had balance. Now the judiciary is irrelevant, so you don't have any balance at all. And again, in a parliamentary system, like for example in America, since we don't have a parliamentary system, we can have the Republicans hold the House, the Democrats hold the Senate, Democrats hold the presidency. You got a balance of powers, you got checks on one another. No, in a parliamentary system, the prime minister is picked from the majority, so there's no brakes left in that car. Then he says, I'm for a balancing of majority rights and minority rights. No, but this eviscerated minority rights. Now the minority, whichever minority in any direction in Israel, can't be protected by the judiciary. And then he said, this is the moderate position. No, it's not. The reason why Israel's exploding with anger and protests and all of these people in their military resigning is because this is nowhere near moderate. This is nowhere near the middle. This is extreme, extreme right wing. If you watch that, and I watched the whole interview with Stephanopoulos, you would not have come away with that impression at all. If you didn't know anything about the current situation, you would think that Netanyahu was the centrist candidate in Israel, and he was just trying to help minorities and balance in democracy, because Stephanopoulos never checked him on it. Lie after lie after lie.
So I should also note that in response to a question about the protests, the ongoing protests in Israel, Netanyahu simply says, we'll get over it. They'll get over it. Not a big deal. So just force this, knowing that the majority of people in the country are not in favor of weakening the judicial system in the country, and hope that within due time they will get over it, they'll just move on. We'll see if that's the case. But I do want to go to one last video here because he, as I mentioned earlier, is facing some charges having to do with fraud, breach of trust, and bribery. And he denies any wrongdoing and is even offended at the insinuation that he has connected this weakening of the judicial system to his own potential criminality. Let's watch.
And what do you say to your critics who say that this reform was designed in part for you to protect yourself against these corruption charges you've been facing?
I think it's ridiculous. It has nothing to do with my trial because it's been proceeding for 3 years. It's actually unraveling. I don't know if you know that a few weeks ago, the 3 judges called in the prosecution and said, listen, we haven't heard yet of any of the defense witnesses, but we're telling you, drop the bribery charge. That's the main charge. You should drop it right now. So look, I have only one request for my trial that hasn't been met so far, that we have live television coverage of the trial. It's the best show in town. This has nothing to do with my trial. It's a bogus charge.
So he says it's a bogus charge. But again, the timing, super convenient for him, super convenient.
So what the people on TV never tell you, for understandable reasons, is that they oftentimes get these guests in a competition with other shows. And so how do they compete to get Netanyahu on ABC instead of NBC or CBS? Well, they promise him goodies, that they'll be fair to him. So then what they do is 100% marketing. So Stephanopoulos asks a softball question disguised as a hardball question. It looks like Stephanopoulos is challenging him on the fact that he has these criminal charges against him, but he knows that Netanyahu knows that question is coming, so Netanyahu has a BS answer ready. Oh, I am innocent, I want the whole world to watch. Oh, the bribery charges are gonna be dropped. Oh, this has nothing to do with my case. I mean, it would affect it completely, but it has nothing to do with it. If you're doing a real interview, you then challenge him after that with facts showing that he is wrong. Nope, no follow-up at all. So when you ask the question, it's meant to help him do marketing to pretend that his case is not relevant when it's definitely relevant to this. So it's just a miserable interview. And at the end, Stephanopoulos with another hardball question of like, well, President Biden seems to disagree a little bit. He wanted you to slow down, did you? Like, first of all, that's not even the question at hand. Israel's having an internal issue here. Who cares what Biden thinks or McConnell thinks? I get it, your relationship with America is relevant.
Yeah.
I understand that. But again, it's such a softball because then he gets to go, oh yeah, no, I did slow down for 3 months because Biden asked me to because I'm such a great ally to America. Well, no, you slowed down because you were worried about national security and all those people that were gonna quit, and you use it as a way to get more support. And I hear you, and that's normal politics inside your own country, but you didn't soften it 1%. And so it made it seem like he agreed with Biden when he doesn't. Even Biden, who's gonna give him everything he wants anyway, right? But put out a strongly worded letter about Netanyahu. But if you watch that interview, again, you would probably think that Netanyahu and Biden agree 100% at this point, when that's not remotely the case.
Look, at the end of the day, we here in the United States, like as ordinary citizens, have no control over what happens in Israel. It's really important for the people of Israel to do what they've been doing, to stand up and to be persistent in their protests, be strategic in trying to get this power-hungry right-wing prime minister out of office. I think that that's like what they should focus on. But here in the United States, we should focus on our own government and what our own government supports, right? So I'm not interested in Biden's strongly worded letter to Benjamin Netanyahu. The argument that we hear from the US government in regard to Israel over and over again is this is the strongest democracy, this is the best democracy in the region. How are you gonna make that argument as you're funneling billions of dollars in US tax money to Israel, right? To help them with Iron Dome, to help them with their military. What is the excuse gonna be now, right? How are you gonna argue that it's a democracy while the only pressure the US government has applied to the Israeli government on this issue is a strongly worded letter?
Yeah, don't get me wrong. Like Biden definitely disagrees with him, and Netanyahu, who almost made it seem like that he agreed with him. But the disagreement is irrelevant, and that's why I don't even like the question, because the question is, if Stephanopoulos knows we're not going to do anything to Israel, he knows we're not going to take away $1 from Israel. He's just doing this as like a way of, again, seeming like he's asking him a hard question. Ooh, could this endanger your relationship with America? Okay, why don't you ask Biden next time he's on? Are you gonna cut a single dollar? Look, no one in mainstream media would even dare to ask such a question And so if we're all outraged, and Biden is genuinely outraged at how Netanyahu is destroying democracy in Israel, and if you love our allies in Israel, you would want democracy, you would root for them to have a healthy government that is more democratic, well then you would push your allies in the right direction. But are we gonna do that? No. We can't, look, people will love to throw around identity politics here to cover for their political positions, especially their right-wing positions. But the reality is, of course we're not gonna do anything because of the lobbyists. So I've been covering politics for 25 years. It doesn't matter if it's a Republican or a Democrat in charge at all. Israel's funding has never been cut, it's only been added to every single year. No politician is ever allowed to question it. When Ilhan Omar questioned it a little bit, they did a resolution calling her an anti-Semite when she made the most obvious point in the world that lobbyists matter, not just for Israel, but for Saudi Arabia, for all these countries, and for all these companies and interests. To pretend that the lobbyists don't matter when they're funneling millions and millions of dollars into these politicians is absurd, and it's a giant lie by the American media going, oh, I don't see it. Oh, did the money wind up in ads for us? Oh no, golly gee, get out of here, man. We know nothing's gonna happen. It doesn't matter if Attila the Hun runs Israel. We're gonna give them more money and more money and more money because it has nothing to do with our love for Israel. It doesn't, because if it did, then we would want to actually help our ally go in the right direction. No, we don't care. Those politicians just want the money and they will do as they're told. Look, people are gonna get really mad, but Netanyahu's not 1% worried because we're not the boss of him. And he knows it, and that's just the reality. Same reason, by the way, that Mohammed bin Salman in Saudi Arabia, not 1% worried because we're not the boss of him. And that's how these lobbyists have completely taken over our government.
When we come back from the break, we're gonna move away from foreign news and focus a little bit on what's happening domestically, including what appears to be an imminent arraignment for Donald Trump, the third indictment. That and more coming up.
All right, back on TYT, let's go to our member comments. Heart Sound says, I actually like how the far right is showing its hand so blatantly in Israel, finally generating concern among unconditional supporters of the Holy Land for whatever reason. Maybe, just maybe, it will cost them some missiles or fighter jets. I hear you on that, but there's no chance of that. No chance. Look, guys, when Nina Turner ran in Ohio, Chantel Brown put out a public statement saying, I will agree to anything Israel wants. And so then Democratic Majority for Israel came in and gave her side basically several $1 million, over $2 million. And they did it in 2 different races. So I lost track of how many millions of dollars they poured into that race. Nina Turner said, no, I'm gonna use independent judgment. I'm gonna try to help our ally Israel in every way that I think makes sense, and also help the Palestinians in every way that I think makes sense. So that's why they spent so much money to defeat her, and it worked. And once that worked, that sends the message, you better not cross Israel, otherwise some lobbyists will come in and spend millions of dollars against you. People say that's anti-Semitic. That's insane. That's a fact. And it doesn't matter that it's Israel. Again, Sam Bankman-Fried did it on crypto. ExxonMobil does it on oil. It has nothing to do with race, ethnicity, background, religion, etc. Everyone buys our politicians. In fact, if you're a foreign country and you're not pouring millions of dollars into American politicians, you're idiots. They're all for sale. They're so easy to buy. I mean, look, anyway, any foreign country that isn't buying American politicians is led by a total moron. Our guys are totally up for sale. They'll do anything for your country. They'll take billions of dollars of our taxpayer money and hand it over to you if you just give them a couple of $1,000. It doesn't matter what the country is, they'll do it. Shy Coltrane 42 says, Netanyahu should be sharing a prison cell with Trump. Yeah, he's got those corruption charges. But I'll tell you, look, most honest, fair show there is. Those corruption charges against Netanyahu would get laughed out of court in America. America's so much more corrupt. Those are actually like, if you brought that against Trump, there'd be a revolution. They'd be like, this is nothing, right? So Israel's judiciary is actually tough, and their prosecutors are much tougher, and that's why Netanyahu just got rid of them. And Mace 54321 said, why are we listening to a fascist talk about democracy? Send him to The Hague to try him for war crimes and crimes against humanity, and then put him in prison where he belongs. Well, we've gotten used to our world leaders being criminals, and this whole idea that Israel's a democracy, I'm sorry, but it's a joke. It's a democracy except for the millions of people that we occupy. It's like if America said we're a democracy, but we're occupying all of Mexico. We took away all their freedoms, and they're not allowed to control their own borders or their own businesses, et cetera, et cetera. They don't have any freedom at all, but we're a democracy. No, you're not. You're occupying a completely different country and millions of people. So the whole thing was a joke to begin with. Turksaurus Rex says, Cenk, you know better than anyone that in mainstream corporate news in the US, you do not challenge power, and above all, you never, ever challenge Israel. And that's a fact, and they'll cry about it. Show me an example. And on MSNBC, to be fair, they do have not just Mehdi Hassan doing it, but they have Ayman, I'm forgetting his last name, but he does a good job as well. We're fair. We'll be back. All right, back on TYT, Cenk and Anna with you guys, and Ingram. Well, I think as a recent member, gifted 5 Young Turks memberships. So we appreciate it. You're awesome. Casper.
Well, let's talk a little bit about one of the many investigations that Donald Trump is facing.
Trump's lawyers were told to expect an indictment during the meeting this morning. However, Trump and a spokesman are disputing that.
Trump received a letter from Smith's office last week saying he's a target of the investigation. That letter outlined 3 federal statutes: deprivation of rights under color of law, conspiracy to defraud the United States, and tampering with a witness.
New reporting indicates that Donald Trump's indictment in the case involving his attempts to overturn the 2020 election is imminent, although it seemed as though it was going to happen today. So far, no word on that. However, as you heard in that video, Donald Trump's legal team did meet with Jack Smith, the special counsel investigating Trump in this particular case, and here are the details. So Trump attorneys Todd Blanche and John Lauro were meeting in Washington with prosecutors from special counsel Jack Smith's office Thursday morning, and that's according to 3 sources with direct knowledge of the situation. Members of the grand jury hearing evidence in the case were seen arriving at the federal courthouse earlier in the morning. Now, as was also mentioned in the video that you watched, Trump is denying that there's any indication that his indictment is imminent in this case. And he also wrote about this meeting that his lawyers had on Truth Social, claiming that, quote, my lawyers had a productive meeting with the DOJ this morning, explaining in detail that I did nothing wrong. I highly doubt that's what happened. Was advised by many lawyers, and that an indictment of me would only further destroy our country. No indication of notice was given during the meeting. Do not trust the fake news on anything. So, Cenk, thoughts on this? Do you believe that an indictment in the 2020 election case is imminent?
It certainly looks that way. So you wouldn't send the target letter unless you were going to indict him. And Trump's team meeting with Smith's team ahead of time is very normal, but nothing's going to come out of it, because normally you'd be talking about potential plea deals, but I can't imagine that they would do a plea deal here. I don't know what they would plea for. I don't know what Trump would accept. I can't think of a single thing that Trump would admit to doing wrong. And by the way, that doesn't mean that Trump would never do it. He has admitted to doing things wrong and making cases go away before. Remember the $25 million fine that he paid. In fact, in 2 different scams, he agreed that he was guilty and paid fines. That's Trump University and the Trump charity, right? But this is a criminal case, and it's a very, very important one, both for him personally, but also politically. So I don't know what the meeting was about, but it is overall fairly routine. It almost certainly is going to get indicted. The only question that remains, guys, is how quickly can these cases go? Because, the Trump-friendly lawyer in the most important one, the documents one, well, you could argue that actually this one, the January 6th one, is the most important because this is the mother lode. This is about the coup that they tried with the fake electors, right? But the national security one with the documents is the most clear-cut case, and it's very severe crimes that he committed. But unfortunately, that judge pushed it out till past Super Tuesday. So it's unclear how much it's going to affect the primaries. And for the cases, they shouldn't take that into account. But for the rest of us, it is enormously relevant.
So there are some updates on the other investigations that Donald Trump is facing. Remember, he is also facing charges. He was indicted on 37 criminal counts related to his handling of classified documents. He pleaded not guilty to all 37 counts. However, there's an update to that investigation because, as ABC News reports, Donald Trump and 2 others are facing additional charges in special counsel Jack Smith's investigation into Trump's handling of classified documents. The charges have come in a superseding indictment to the original charges in the case. So this could mean that Trump could face additional charges in this particular case. Now, one of those charged is Carlos de Oliveira, who is a current Trump Organization employee who is also the head of maintenance at Mar-a-Lago. We'll see what the additional charges will be, but that story is developing as we speak. It literally just broke.
Yeah, so some of the key things here in both cases, in the documents case, Walter Nauta is his main assistant basically at Mar-a-Lago. If he turns on him, Trump's in a lot of trouble. If he stays with Trump, he might be okay. No, probably not. That case is super solid, right? But Nauta would be a nail in the coffin. But if he wins the election, he could just pardon himself. So that's because that's a federal one. This is also federal. And in this January 6th case, the potential giant witness could be Mark Meadows, his former chief of staff. No one's heard from Mark Meadows in a long, long time.
That's a good point.
And there was a little bit of talk about him giving testimony, and it was not clear whether he got an immunity deal, whether he's gonna flip on Trump or not. It's like the best kept secret in America. But if Meadows flips on him in this case, that could be problematic because Meadows knows they were gonna do the fake elector scheme. Meadows knows that Trump said that it was no big deal if Mike Pence got murdered, that he deserved it.
I mean, Meadows wrote about this in his book, didn't he?
No, Navarro wrote about it in his book.
Oh, that's right, that's right.
Meadows has been in a witness protection program since the Trump presidency ended. So we'll see. Not literally, by the way, just in case you're wondering. But he has been hiding out, and it's weird how no one's talking about him. So I wonder if they already flipped him and they're trying to keep that ace in their pocket, but that's speculative.
Look, honestly, the circus that has kind of developed in American politics is concerning, right? So like you have the head of the Republican Party, still the head of the Republican Party, Donald Trump, looking ahead toward yet another indictment on another case, and that's of course having to do with his attempts to overturn the 2020 election. You have the other 2 issues, right? The hush money payments. Then you also have the issue with his handling of classified documents. Then you look at Republicans in Congress, like Marjorie Greene, printing out giant props of Hunter Biden naked, right? To show during a House hearing. Like, can we where are the adults? Like, are any competent people left?
Well, no, of course not. And remember, look, I write about this in my book, Justice is Coming. As recently as a couple of election cycles ago, 95% of the time, the candidate with more money wins the congressional elections, okay? So what that means is, and it used to be 97%. So what that means is, even if you're in the 3 to 5% who are honest, and you won, they're gonna come for you over and over and over again. And eventually, the ones who keep taking the money and doing the wrong things are going to dominate in this system. And they are dominating. So that's why nobody's trying to pass any laws, because the laws would help you. The only laws that they pass are to help corporations and the wealthy. And you see it over and over again. Now, the Republicans are brazen. They do it 24/7. They've never pass. They're not even trying to pass a single law that would help the average American. If you challenge them on it, they don't even have one. They're like, oh, well, if we help the rich, well, eventually they'll trickle all over you or something, right? That's why we did the IRS, trying to take away the IRS agents first, because they were going to audit only the rich. And we can't have that. Those are our top donors. That was their #1 priority. But the Democrats, they play a game too, where they give you 10% of what you want, and then go, okay, it's all mission accomplished.
10%,
right?
That's cute.
And then the media come in and go, historic, oh my God, the Democrats are fighting for you. And then they high five behind the scenes.
So some more developments in the investigation into Trump's handling of classified documents. So he's facing 2 additional charges. Was charged with 1 additional count of willful retention of national defense information, and I apologize. And in addition to that, 2 additional obstruction counts related to alleged attempts to delete surveillance video footage at his Mar-a-Lago resort in the summer of 2022.
See, that's important too, because that is clearly a crime and super easy to prove. And they wouldn't charge it unless they already had the evidence. This is a very careful prosecutor, right? So, look guys, the giant question here is, if Trump gets convicted, what happens next? Is he actually going to go to prison? That seems inconceivable.
He's not.
Inconceivable. So okay, so are we just going to be like, yeah, he's guilty and we all know it, but who cares? He's not going to go to prison. There's going to be no consequences, and he's going to run for president, and he might win the presidency. And then he pardons himself, and he commit any crimes he likes, and then pardon himself. Commit crimes, pardon himself.
I gotta jump in.
And we're all okay with that?
I gotta jump in. You know what's so incredible is Hunter Biden did commit tax crimes. And so his plea deal fell apart yesterday in court. And the plea deal, at least as far as he and his legal team understood it, was that if he pleads guilty to the tax crimes, they will drop a DOJ charge against him in regard to possession of an illegal firearm, okay? And he would serve no time behind bars if he took that plea deal. Republicans were furious about that because they demand that he serve time behind bars. Now look, he committed a crime, and if I were to avoid paying my taxes, especially if I've been making millions and millions of dollars, I don't know if I'd end up in prison, right? But I certainly wouldn't get any special treatment. Ordinary people would not get special treatment. So I hear the GOP out on that. However, they provide cover for all of Trump's criminality, regardless of what he does. It doesn't matter what he does. Handling of classified documents, who cares? Who cares? Let's try to find a hollow whataboutism comparing Trump to Biden, even though Biden handed over documents as soon as he realized he was in possession of them.
Whataboutism goes both ways.
Right.
So and I dare any Republican to answer this honestly. There's no way in the world they will, not one, okay? What if Biden had done the same things Trump did? Would you want him being prosecuted or not? And you know you would. So go ahead and lie to yourself if you want, okay? But we all know it and you know it. Oh, Biden already took home documents. He didn't take home top secret documents. He didn't stuff them in the bathroom and etc. And much more importantly, when he found the documents himself, turned them over. When the FBI said, hey, Mr. President, we know you have documents to Trump. He's like, oh, no, I don't. Why did he lie to the FBI?
He lied to his own attorneys. If Biden lied to the FBI like that and hidden the most top secret documents we have, including about our nuclear programs and about the nuclear programs of our allies, you guys would want his head on a stick, and you know that. And you know that. Imagine if Biden came up with a scheme of having fake electors that when he loses an election, he just puts in the fake electors and says he won. Can you imagine?
And Kamala Harris is his vice president. She goes, no, I'm going to recognize the fake electors and not the real electors. You guys would have civil war. You would be so mad. You would commit massive violence, okay? And you all know it. You all know it, right? But when Trump does it, oh, that's my daddy. That's my daddy's. I'm a little baby, so I'm gonna let my daddy commit every crime and not do a goddamn thing about it. Try to be an American for a change, okay? We believe in democracy. Well, I don't know what you guys believe. Why don't you guys move to Saudi Arabia? Trump loves it so much, you guys can all move there.
No, I gotta say, the tete thing that you just did was amazing. Okay, let's move on. We've got other news to get to, including Governor of Florida doing something that I just don't understand. So, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis' petty quarrel with Disney has now entered the phase of defund the police to own the libs. I'm not even kidding. That is what his appointed board is currently working to do. So the board that DeSantis appointed to oversee Disney Special District is now looking to cut millions of dollars from the very deputies who protect the park's guests. So during a Wednesday meeting, officials said the previous board spent $8.2 million to be exact, every year on law enforcement overtime on Disney properties. Now the board is doing away with that spending and cutting $8 million used to pay law enforcement officers in off-duty shifts, saying the cost of fighting Disney in court has caused it to have to find money in other places. Okay, so this is so incredible. Now, there is currently a deal in place with the Orange County Sheriff's Office that will last through the fall of 2024. So any cuts that they make will impact the deputies and impact Disney after the fall of 2024. Now, Martin Garcia, who is the chairman of the DeSantis-appointed Central Florida Tourism Oversight District, said this: there was spending on a number of fronts that was wasteful. $8 million was being used for law enforcement services exclusively on Disney properties, and that doesn't make any sense to me. Further, Garcia noted, as we are doing more work, it appears there are a number of other naughty things that this old board did with district funds. Now, $8 million does sound like a lot of money when it comes to policing of the Disney resorts in Florida. But I do want to give you some proper context in case you're unfamiliar with how much land they control there and just how many parks they oversee. So apparently Disney has about 25,000 acres in Florida. And so those are the 25,000 acres that the police deputies would patrol. They have 4 theme parks, 2 water parks, golf courses, dozens of hotels, shops, restaurants, and bars. And I didn't know this, but part of the reason why Disney has control of that land is because back in the 1950s, I believe it was, when they wanted to develop that land, the state had no money. They could not help with that development. They couldn't help with roads. They couldn't help with the infrastructure necessary to support the resorts. So Disney is basically used their resources to build all the infrastructure in that town in order to accommodate the theme parks that they later built. So they also do contribute taxes to the state of Florida. This is very different from some of these sweetheart deals and the subsidized projects that other states do for, let's say, Amazon warehouses. Don't think of it that way because it is different from those subsidies. But Cenk, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, look, when I first saw this story breaks into 2 different parts. One is, should DeSantis have gone after Disney in the first place? That's an easy one. Disney just said, hey, we don't approve of the Don't Say Gay bill. They didn't even call it the Don't Say Gay bill. They called it its real name. They didn't do anything. Like, it was just like an empty statement. And so like, if you're in the LGBTQ community, there's nothing even to be too happy about. I get, okay, good, a company says something nice, but there was no consequences, no nothing. Okay, they didn't fight back 1%. But DeSantis caught feelings. And so the reality is, of course, it isn't about feelings. He thinks, oh, if I go after Disney for being too woke, my base will be happy because this is the original bill is about discriminating against people in the LGBTQ community. And DeSantis thinks, not me, DeSantis thinks his base hates the gay community. And so any controversy that gets a lot of attention where DeSantis is seen as the fighter against the LGBTQ community, he thinks is going to be a political win for him. So that's the easy part. But when he turned to, hey, I'm going to take away their authority here in running this town in Florida, I was like, well, I'm not sure they should have that authority. Like, why is a company running a town and why are they deciding where the taxpayer money goes? That doesn't seem right at all. So DeSantis might be accidentally correct here. And like, we should see if they should have ever had that. But when you look into the details, it turns out, no, shockingly, Disney's overpaying in taxes.
Yeah.
I almost can't believe it.
I know.
And the reason I think that happened is because the deals were struck such a long time ago that it was the pre-Buckley v. Vallejo decisions in the Supreme Court that allowed for bribery, basically, in America. It was pre-bribery decisions. So Disney actually pays money to 2 nearby counties, taxes, full taxes, and then pays taxes for this area as well. So they're double paying in taxes, and it's their tax money that goes to that $8 million in cops that DeSantis's goons just defunded.
Yeah.
So they take Disney's money and we go, we're not gonna give it to you in cops. But it's Disney's money in the first place.
Right, so look, I wanna note that they're attempting to defund the police in this area, the Disney deputies. However, that decision will not be finalized until later. September 27th is the final vote on that. So let's hold and wait and see what happens. But the other thing I wanted to bring up and also give credit to a Mediaite writer who shed some light on this, Sarah Rumpf, is that these are the very deputies who actually ended up deterring the Pulse nightclub shooter from shooting up one of their parks. I didn't know this, but apparently the Pulse nightclub wasn't where the shooter initially wanted to carry out that disgusting violent attack that killed dozens of people. He and his wife were scoping out Disney theme parks. So I want to give you a few excerpts from Sarah Rumpf's piece in Mediaite. According to statements, the shooter's wife, Noor Salman, made to federal authorities, the couple had scouted several Walt Disney World locations, including the shopping and entertainment complex known as Disney Springs, in the days before the shooting. So at the 2018 trial for her obstruction and aiding her husband in the attack, federal prosecutors entered evidence that included Omar Mateen, that was the shooter, buying a stroller and baby doll at a local Walmart one day before the shooting to smuggle his gun into Disney property, and a video of him walking near the House of Blues on June 12th, several hours before the shooting. In the video, you can see him like looking behind him at police officers standing by.
Yeah, and look, you got to give the conservative case a little bit of credit here. So they say, hey, if we have more good guys with guns and cops surrounding every location, shooters will be less likely to go into those locations. 9 out of 10 times it doesn't work that way at all. They just walk right past the guards and do their mass shooting. We've seen it in school after school, let alone other places. But in this case, they were right. The cops did deter Mateen from shooting there. Unfortunately, they didn't deter him from shooting overall. He just went down the street and killed 49 people at Pulse nightclub and injured another 53. But taking away these officers from Disney could be disastrous. And Disney's in a very tough spot because they can't fight back, I think. And the reason I say that is because if they go to fight back publicly with DeSantis, they'll have to say now there's not as much security at Disney, and that might scare away customers. So they're kind of in a bind here. But this, look, there's so many ironies in the story because politicians trying to hold corporations accountable would be an incredible relief in this country.
It would be an improvement from what we have today.
So welcome, right?
Right.
But of course, as usual, in this case, the Republican DeSantis has found a way to attack a corporation in the only nonsensical way possible.
Well, I mean, look, it really, you have to understand what motivates them and what the ideology is driven by, right? Conservative Republicans like Ron DeSantis do not have a problem with corporate greed. The populism that you see building in the country and has been building in the country for years now stems from the inequality and the corporate greed and all of that. And I don't know for a fact that Ron DeSantis wants to ride that wave and give the illusion that he wants to hold corporations accountable. And he's doing it, not through attacking corporate greed, but specifically because of culture war nonsense, right? But I do think that other Republicans have tried to give this appearance that they're trying to take the corporations to task. I mean, I remember when we had Prager on. I was debating Prager and he's like, I hate corporations. Yeah. But he wasn't saying that because he hates corporate greed. He was saying that because he doesn't like the woke culture within the corporations.
Yeah, it's their way of feeding the anti-big business fervor that their base has, but misdirecting it. Oh, don't worry about how they're robbing you blind by bribing all the politicians and getting billions of dollars in subsidies. That's your taxpayer money that they're robbing. No, don't be worried about it. Oh, they like gay people, boo. That's what the real problem with companies is. They're ruining your lives and crushing your wages and dignity and respect because they like gay people? And that's the trick that these guys all play. Look, one last thing to our Republican viewers. I challenge you guys. If you're really upset about the woke companies, why don't you ask all the Republican politicians to stop taking their money?
That's a great point.
And by the way, we're honest here and we're fair and principled. We ask all the Democrats to stop taking their money. We don't just ask, we just pound them over and over again about their corruption because they take the money of those corporations. Are you gonna ask your Republican politicians to do that? Are you gonna ask Ron DeSantis to do that? Are you gonna ask Donald Trump to do that? Yes, Donald Trump takes that money too. Okay, are you gonna ask Mitch McConnell to do that? For Mitch McConnell, you might hate him because of Trump, and maybe you'll listen to it there. But remember, they're all corrupt. They all take that company bribes they call campaign contributions. Go ahead, challenge them on it. You'll find out.
All right, we got to take a break. When we come back, more funds and games. This time we'll talk a little bit about how one of the major manufacturers of opioids is trying to skirt having to pay $1.7 billion to the victims of the opioid crisis. That and more coming up. Don't miss it.
All right, back on TYT. OJM writes in, how are you going to argue Israel's a democracy while we send them guns and money? Easy, well, we'll just say they're the only democracy over and over again because propaganda works. We've already been conditioned to buy that line for decades. Yeah, that line drives me crazy, but like it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how many times you tell people the truth and it's obvious. They just ignore it. And they're like, no, it's a democracy for us. I mean, we don't care about you, so no problem. So that's not really how democracy works. By the way, if they free the Palestinians, then they have a democracy. It might be an imperfect one, but ours is imperfect. There's a lot of imperfect democracies. Okay, Monica says, I have to enter a correction for something Cenk said recently, so we're skipping what Monica wrote, and we're going to. I'm kidding. She continued. A few days ago, he was talking about the climate and heat waves and mentioned how some people think a solution is to move to Mars, which is even hotter. Sorry, Cenk, Mars is much colder than Earth, with an average temperature of about minus 80 degrees Fahrenheit, though it varies from the equator to the poles like on Earth. Of course, I know that. It's a common mistake. The red soil gives us the sense it's desert-like, but that red is actually rust, so Mars is cold. I know you want to be as accurate as possible on TYT, so this is me doing my part to keep the accuracy high. By the way, laughing emoji, heart emoji. A heart, Monica, heart emoji back to you, laughing emoji back to you. And yeah, it's a bad mistake. It's a rookie mistake. Thank you for correcting it. We really appreciate it.
How would someone who's childish and acts like a baby react to that criticism or that critique?
Sure. Monica says that Mars is cold, but I don't like it. My feelings say it's hot.
Yes. I don't know where the pacifier thing came from, but I'm here for it. I love it.
But I did. It's funny you said that because I thought, how would the right wing react to this undeniable fact? They'd be like, no, not buying it. Trump says it's hot, it's hot. Okay, not listening to what Monica has to say and her stupid scientist friends. Okay, Bob on Facebook told me it was really hot. Okay, don't shoot on the goalkeeper wrote and in prison. Dude, if Biden did half the crap that Trump did, Republicans would call for him to be hanged. Actually, they called for Pence to be hanged just because he wouldn't cheat on their behalf. So you're not exactly wrong. Tyrannosaurus in F14 says, I pay TYT money to give me videos of Cenk mocking Trump and supporters like he just did. I get my money's worth. You're welcome. Sometimes my kids will come to me and say, you're welcome. And I'm like, for what? For no reason.
No, I love your kids, that's great.
Turkosaurus Rex writes, and Cenk, I'd like you to get your take on the UAP hearing yesterday. Seems like you're the only TYT anchor who can cover the subject without prejudice, sarcasm, and outright derision.
That's not true.
Okay, All right, back on TYT, Cenk and Anna. I was in the middle of answering a question when during the social break, so I'll just finish that thought.
Hold, was that a member?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. We actually have videos that we didn't even get to about the UFO hearing yesterday because John was just not buying the story and it was awkward to talk about it with someone who doesn't care. Why don't we talk about it a little bit in the bonus episode?
Oh, okay. I'll definitely interested there.
Okay.
The aliens have definitely come here. It's not even close.
Oh, okay, never mind. We're not going to talk about it.
No, we're going to talk about it and we're going to have a rational conversation. I don't understand why people can't understand simple logic. Anyways, we'll talk about tyt.com/join to become a member or hit the join button below on YouTube. And Bruce Salazar, thank you for gifting 3 memberships to the community. You're awesome. Anna.
All right, this next story gives you a sense of just how much our system is slanted in the direction of corporate interests, and it's incredible. So, a group of hedge funds are now conspiring a plan that would cut off about $1 billion meant to help victims of the opioid epidemic. Now, the plan would allow the hedge funds to keep the cash that was meant to be allocated to these victims for themselves. So how will this happen? Now, it's important to understand a little bit of context. Let's go back and talk a little bit about a particular opioid manufacturer, okay? So at the center of this story is drug manufacturer Mallinckrodt, which was the country's largest producer of opioid pills between 2006 and 2014. So they were taken to court for their role in the opioid crisis in the country, and the results of that, case led to a $1.7 billion payout to the victims. Now, court papers filed in 2019 in connection with a federal investigation into the company showed that Mallinckrodt sales representatives discussed how consumers of their opioids were becoming addicted, with one writing the pills were just like Doritos, keep eating, we'll make more. And boy, did they make more, a lot more. So when I say that they were the top opioid producer in the country between 2006 and 2014, here's what I meant. Between 2006 and 2014, the manufacturer made 2.3 billion opioid pills, making it the single largest producer in the United States during that period. And that's according to the Drug Enforcement Agency. And the DEA records later showed that 40%, nearly half, 40% of all opioid pills sold in US pharmacies between 2006 and 2012 all came from this one manufacturer. So here's the outcome of the lawsuits. There were municipal and state lawsuits toward this company. And so Mallinckrodt last year agreed to pay $1.7 billion to resolve thousands of lawsuits brought by state and local governments and opioid addicted individuals who accuse the company of helping cause a public health crisis. And the settlement funds were supposed to be paid through 2030. Okay, and they were meant to help state health departments buy life-saving overdose reversal drugs like Narcan, and also pay for the treatment costs, the rehabilitation costs for people who took the prescription drugs and became addicted to them. So far, about 1.3 billion of the 1.7 billion has yet to be paid, and this is where the hedge funds come in. I'm gonna stop for comment, Cenk. What do you think about this so far?
Yeah, this is a disastrous idea. It was also inevitable, and it is really important that the courts find a way to make sure this does not happen.
So let me tell you guys about what the idea is, because I haven't gotten to those details yet.
I know, I'm with you. But I just want to say, look, hedge fund guys are always going to try to stiff people on their bills. And it's not like, it's capitalism. They're not gonna just give over billions of dollars in money, right? They're gonna fight tooth and nail, and it's the job of the government to protect you, as they were supposed to do with these opioids. They didn't. Individuals and states had to sue to get redress of grievances. And now, of course, the wealthy are coming in to undo it all to begin with. All these opioids were heroin to be in the first place. They just legalized it and let guys in suits sell it. Once we allowed for bribery, all of this was inevitable.
Now, the worst part about all of this is there is a plan in place involving these hedge funds to essentially assist this manufacturer in avoiding having to pay out the money. Okay, remember I told you that 1.3 billion of the 1.7 billion has yet to be paid to the victims of the opioid crisis that was partly caused by this manufacturer just pumping out pills into the market. So Mallincourt is talking to hedge funds about filing for bankruptcy and avoiding payments intended to help people addicted to opioids. As part of a prearranged deal, the manufacturer will propose to write off about $1 billion from what it still owes to addiction victims and state and local governments, while making a one-time payment of roughly $250 million. So the group of hedge funds is essentially wanting the company to go through another bankruptcy, Chapter 11 bankruptcy, and through that restructuring, the hedge funds would then be the owners of the pharmaceutical company, the manufacturer here, and they would write off the bulk of what remains owed to the opioid victims and only pay out just a small fraction, $250 million. The funds under their plan would become Mallincourt's new owners following an exit from Chapter 11, writing down some of their billions in debt in exchange for stakes in the restructured company, the people said. They could stand to lose out if the company's stock plummets in value after it exits from bankruptcy, but they could also be big winners if Mallincourt buys back stock, which they certainly will, or pays out dividends to its new shareholders, the people said.
Yeah, so first of all, this is really important. They're not bankrupt. The Wall Street Journal says in the article, like, well, the hedge fund guys are worried that they are less profitable now and they're worried about their investment. Yeah, that's called capitalism. So what? You guys sold a drug that was highly addictive. You did it on purpose. You knew that it was going to not only get a lot of people addicted, but get a lot of people killed. And you profited off of it. You got caught. You did a settlement. And now you're saying, yeah, I know, but that's gonna hurt my profits. I know, that's why you were sued. Because we wanna hurt your profits. Because you profited off of their deaths, right? And so now they're saying, yeah, but look, if we just declare a false bankruptcy, we'll just pretend we're bankrupt, it's gonna wipe away our debts. Now, if they did this normally and the other end of the transaction was another company or private interest, they wouldn't let them get away with it, because then both sides are fighting for $1 billion, and the other guys would sue them to oblivion, and they'd fight this out forever and ever, and one side would win. But the hedge fund guys are thinking the other side is just the government. It's much easier to beat. And remember, all we gotta do is grease these politicians. They do anything they want. Remember when they legalized heroin for us? You think that they're gonna fight us tooth and nail? No, they're gonna let us keep, if not the entire billion, a giant chunk of the billion if we do this scam. But if they're allowed to do this scam, then anyone who is not bankrupt can declare bankruptcy to not pay their bills, especially bills to the American taxpayer.
This happens all the time with corporations. I want you guys to really absorb this, okay? Because of the bankruptcy bill that Joe Biden championed, students are unable to discharge their student loan debt, even in the case of a bankruptcy. However, corporations that are doing well, are actually very profitable, are able to declare bankruptcy in an effort to skirt financial responsibility as a result of litigation. That is exactly what this is. And by the way, I want to provide the evidence for how profitable this company is, right? Because back in May, executives from Mallincourt had a shareholder meeting. And during that shareholder meeting, here's what we found. Around the time that Silver Point and other funds approached the company over plans to back out of the settlement in the spring, it had about $480 million of cash on its balance sheet.
I wish I was that bankrupt.
God, seriously. On its balance sheet, and around $200 million available to be drawn under a bank line of credit. And it wasn't in default under any of its debts. And that's according to public filings and people familiar with the matter. During that shareholder meeting, the executives are like, oh, we're doing real well, man. It's just so brazen. This whole thing is so brazen.
So guys, if they, like I said, if they get away with this, then any company can say, I'm not paying any of my bills, okay? Especially if I owe the taxpayers, I'm gonna screw them. I'm gonna do a fake bankruptcy. Look at how the Wall Street Journal took those facts and how they framed it. Because Wall Street Journal is written for, of, and by corporations. So they're gonna spin the entire story into, oh, poor poor hedge fund guys. So they had to do this. Now, they never clarify in the article that they're sitting on $480 million and not at all bankrupt, right? Instead, they wrote this sentence about the hedge fund guys. They also argued that if Mallinckrodt continued to make payments to the opioid trust, it would hurt the company's finances and could breach legal obligations to investors, according to people familiar with the matter. The people familiar with the matter are the hedge fund guys that are doing the scam in the first place. They plant the story in the Wall Street Journal, and the Wall Street Journal tells you, well, they're having trouble with their finances. What does that mean? What does that mean? Are you bankrupt or are you not bankrupt? Everyone has trouble with their finances. Hey, we thought we were gonna make $500 million and we only made $400 million. Oh, trouble with your finances. Such a vague term, but it gives you the appearance that they're struggling when they're not at all struggling.
Yeah, and later in the piece, they write about how much cash they have on hand and how much they have for their line of credit, but it's disconnected in the piece.
Yeah,
right? Yeah.
And it, like for the first, I mean, you read pages of this article and you're thinking, these poor guys, are they going bankrupt? And at the end you find out, oh yeah, by the way, just kidding. We have some sort of obligation to tell you that they're not at all bankrupt, okay? So anyways, look guys, there's one other element to this. So not only is this a scam to rip off the taxpayers and to the people who got hurt in these situations, but at the end, once they go through the bankruptcy, the senior lenders get, and the senior investors have the most rights.
Exactly.
Well, it's these hedge fund guys.
Exactly.
So it's a win-win for them. They're like, okay, we do this thing, that way we stiff the average American for $1 billion, and we take control of the whole company, and we get all the profits. And by the way, I might just take that $480 million and put it in my pocket, which hedge fund guys do all the time. A lot of the companies that you know, Sears, Toys R Us, etc., went bankrupt because hedge fund guys bought them, took their cash, and put it in their pockets, bought mansions and yachts with it, and then go, oh, well, they ran out of money.
So after news of this little scheme broke, this is how sick the system is, right? After news of the scheme broke, yesterday, according to numbers in the stock market actually rewarded this manufacturer, okay? Shares of the company rose 53.3%.
Of course, you know why? Because the market doesn't care about morality.
Yeah, it does not.
The market doesn't care about American citizens or family members of the folks who died because of these drugs. The market thinks, oh, this is a good scam. Oh, bravo on the scam. You might rip off $1 billion. Well, man, your stock price is going up because you're now going to be more valuable. You might be up to, well, maybe you're not going to get the whole billion back, but we're going to price in that you're going to get hundreds of millions of dollars back through this fraud. Now, look, there's a way to end this, by the way. You sign onto a settlement that involves the government and it involves state governments in this case, and then you renege on that, we should put you in prison.
Totally agree.
But like, if hedge fund guys heard that, corporate CEOs heard that, they'd be like, oh, outrageous. So you're saying we should be put in prison for just for stealing $1 billion? Yeah, that's exactly what I'm saying.
When we come back from the break, I guess Jake and I are gonna debate on progressives in Congress. Are they engaging in theater or are they really trying to get some legislation passed? That and more coming up, don't miss it.
You're about to watch some behind the scenes footage of the Young Turks. Ooh. Now these are partial videos. If you want to get all of them, you become a member, go to tyt.com/join, and you'll get all the behind the scenes of me, Anna, John, JR, a little bit reality show like, tyt.com/join, and enjoy this. You know what you're seeing behind me? Jersey, hold. Watch me flip this camera. However I flip it. Do I flip it like this? No, I just took a picture. I'm bitsing right now.
What?
Behind the scenes.
Oh, okay. For members? I don't have my face on.
She doesn't have her face on, folks. Oh, that's JR's ass right there.
You can't take 5 minutes off, can you?
No, I can't, Johnny Pie. I said it was live stream, but I was lying. It's not a live stream. It's just for members. Bitsy, this is my cat. You know what his name is? Kiki Cat.
Animals are innocent.
Control room and the insanity is obviously there.
Right now, as you can see, I'm directing or tech directing.
I'm so happy to be here.
This is what like a Labor Day beard looks like for Cenk. Man, you're a Young Turks viewer if you recognize me like this.
Oh, thank you. You are the one person in my life I would love to meet.
What's going on, guys? This is a Bitsy or a BTS or behind the scenes with Hassan Piker, aka Woke Bay.
Oh, hi, I didn't see you there.
I have finished my show, The Damage Report, and now I get into a really awkward time of the day.
When I'm sitting, the control room is right there. So I can see Bart.
And this is the Pittsburgh office, by the way. Referred to often as the boiler room.
You see how it's ripped? Is it super unprofessional to wear that at a business meeting? Or am I like cool, rebel?
I just finished doing the power panel and I'm fired up.
What do you do for TYT?
Not a whole lot.
If you're frantically tweeting at us that something's broken, thank you, because I'm fixing it.
And thank you for being a TYT member.
Super last thing, because there's always got to be a super last thing. Oh, that was disastrous. This has been behind the scenes, behind the scenes.
Indisputable is still the fastest growing news show in America compared to CNN, Fox News, and 30 other networks. We tell the truth on Indisputable because the truth is indisputable. We go places that other news media outlets refuse to go. When there were human rights abuses happening at the Victorville prison, guards and members of the community contacted us.
You, through your investigative reporting, unearthed very troubling allegations about specific forms of abuse and discrimination in the federal prison system.
It really doesn't take much to be a trusted voice. All it takes is to be fearless, report on matters, be an advocate. I called it the bullpen intentionally because it's a place of preparation. We present individuals who may have an opposing view, so we debate. Sometimes we interview individuals because their stories deserve to be heard. A survivor of significant police misconduct and his attorney. We covered this story earlier, and to remind you of the horror of one man being shot at damn near 100 times by the police. We take time on this show to showcase the temper tantrums of Karens in the wild. We do this not because we want to see people's emotional outbursts in public, but because these incidents are emblematic of a bigger societal issue taking place across the nation, and it has to be checked.
My friend, my big homie, attorney at law, Benjamin Crump.
I just want to thank you, man. When educated, articulate brothers like yourself speak truth to power, it makes a great difference in changing the landscape in America.
Listen, no matter what you do, don't allow the politics of ideology to evaporate the soul that still exists inside of you. They don't stop, I don't stop. Racism won't stop, I won't stop. Systemic bias won't stop, I won't stop. People still need health care, so I won't stop. People still need criminal justice systems reform, so I won't stop. You won't stop either.
All right, back on TYT. Cenk, Anna, Let Me Be Frank, Zappa Hart, Ranger Park, Political Stoner 305G, Tom Sawyer. All the members do the show with us, guys. And thank you for joining. You guys are American heroes. We appreciate it. They hit the join button below on YouTube. You guys can join at tyt.com/join. We appreciate all of you. Casper.
Let's talk a little bit about what progressives are up to in Congress. I'm gonna be a little pessimistic here, so bear with me. Progressive lawmakers in both the House and the Senate have proposed two pieces of legislation, with one focusing on a potential wealth tax and the other calling for a minimum wage hike, which, by the way, has not been done on a federal level for 14 years. Nonetheless, are these serious proposals, or is this just more theater from lawmakers, in this particular case, progressive lawmakers? That's what we're here to discuss and potentially debate. Now, let's start with the wealth tax. I wanna give you guys the details. It's super easy to understand, okay? They call it the oligarch tax, or I'm sorry, OLIGARCH Act. And it was introduced just yesterday by Representatives Barbara Lee, Summer Lee, Rashida Tlaib, and Jamal Bowman. Now, instead of taxing a specific wealth threshold, they have decided to propose something that is way more easy to understand, not complicated at all, okay? They would tax the rich based on how much more wealth they have than the median American household. Apparently, the median American household currently is $120,000 a year.
No, in wealth.
In wealth, my bad, wealth. That's different from income, just wanna be clear about that. So yes, so $120,000 in wealth, okay. So here's how the 4 tax brackets would work should this legislation pass, which it most certainly will not, but nonetheless, let's take a look. So 2% for all wealth between 1,000 and 10,000 times median household wealth, 4% for all wealth between 10,000 and 100,000 times median household wealth, and 6% for all wealth between 100,000 and 1 million times median household wealth, and 8% for all wealth over 1 million times median household wealth. Okay, I mean, very few people are at the top bracket there, but nonetheless, what do you think of this proposal, Cenk, before I move on to the
Okay, so to give you a sense, guys, of who this affects, it affects people with wealth over $120 million. That's the beginning part of their proposal, as things stand today. That's why, if this becomes a real issue and they're battling over this, which is unlikely, and that's part of the debate we're about to have, but you will hear Republicans say, "Oh, they're just trying to tax the average man." No, they're not. They're trying to tax people with more than $120 million, just so you understand. And I like the proposal because they're saying, hey, look, if we don't have income inequality, then this tax won't even exist, because then you won't have 1,000 times the wealth of the average household in America, let alone 1 million times the median household wealth.
Right.
So it makes a lot of sense as a way to structure a wealth tax, if you're gonna have a wealth tax at all.
So the tax is not pegged to a specific dollar threshold. By design, this causes the tax to wax and wane with wealth concentration intensifying during periods of rising inequality, but tapering off to near non-existence when median household wealth increases and inequality moderates to an acceptable level. So additionally, the OLIGARCH Act would require at least a 30% IRS audit rate on households affected by the wealth tax. So, I mean, I just think the IRS should audit people who are clearly filing tax returns that have some shady, like, red flags involved.
No, so they theoretically do, but they've been defunded by the Republicans so much that they don't. So in an ideal world, after a certain number, almost all of those folks would be audited because their taxes are so much. And this does have, theoretically, again, the way that the system was originally structured, you get more audited as your wealth goes up because there's so much more money to gain from when you catch people who are cheating, okay? So, but in reality, the people who get the earned income tax credit, who make the least amount of money in this country, are audited 5.5 times the average person. So we over audit the poor and we under audit the rich. So what this act is saying is at least 30% of these guys have to get audited at a minimum, right? So they're asking for the bare minimum there, if you ask me.
Now let's move on to what Bernie Sanders is proposing. He wants to increase the federal minimum wage, which still stands at $7.25. He wants to increase it to $17 an hour. And look, there are some states that have already, like California, for instance, has raised the minimum wage and it's definitely higher in California compared to other states. But the point of raising the federal minimum wage to $17 an hour is that it increases the wages all across the board. It lifts all wages, so it makes a lot of sense. The question is, will that legislation pass? He proposed it as a United States senator, of course, and Representative Bobby Scott is also involved in co-authoring and sponsoring this bill. And the bill would raise the federal minimum wage from $7.25 to $17 per hour by 2028. So it wouldn't be an immediate increase in the minimum wage. So let's get to the fun part now. Is this real or is this just theater from progressives?
Well, I like it. And so is it the best they can do? No, not at all. And I'll get into in a little bit what they could have actually done to get some of this stuff passed. But I was worried they were doing absolutely nothing. And so what are we, this is July now? I mean, for 6-7 months, nothing proposed, no fight. So now that I'm seeing finally they propose something, I'll take it. I know the bar is super low, but even if it's a rhetorical fight rather than a legislative fight, because the Republicans are gonna block at least the wealth tax for sure, right? Well, at least you're bringing attention to the cause and you're showing where you stand. Now, of course, Anna's going to be right when she says, when push came to shove and they actually could have gotten some of these things done, especially the minimum wage, they chose not to fight. And so now this is not going to work at this point. By the way, it can, the minimum wage one can.
Yeah, I think that has, look, I don't think the minimum wage is gonna pass. I don't think that anyone is even going to fight to ensure that it passes, right? There's not gonna be any pressure applied. And besides which, like we're dealing with, look, my biggest issue with this is that it is performative and everyone involved knows it's performative, okay? And people want cookies for proposing legislation that A, they know has no chance of passing, B, they have no strategy in place to have it pass or attempt to get it passed. And when you look at the proposal here compared to what they were doing when Democrats had a majority in the House of Representatives, it gives you a sense of like, how many people, aside from the co-authors, right? How many Democrats, knowing full well that there's no chance that this is gonna pass, sign on to legislation like this so they can get the cookies?
Oh, for sure.
Right?
But there's two things that come out of things that are performative in politics. One is you want to get cookies for not actually doing anything, but pretending you're doing something.
Exactly, and I'm sick of that.
And that's Anna's main point, and that is 90% of what happens in Washington, right? But there's a second reason for doing things that are quote unquote performative, so you draw attention to it. Once you draw attention to it, then you actually fight for it. So the question is, are they going to fight for it? So for example, if during the Build Back Better negotiations they had fought tooth and nail for $15 minimum wage and they lost, and then they come back and do this, I go, oh, that's fantastic. You can't argue with that because they're trying as hard as they can to get it into legislation. They're using their power, and then they're being performative in a good way because they're drawing attention to it again and then fighting for it again. But if you didn't, but in this case, they didn't fight for it the first time when they had every opportunity to. So in a best case scenario, this is Bernie being Johnny come lately on his own proposal, right? He's the one that highlighted $15 minimum wage in the first place, right? And in a worst case scenario, it's the Just Democrats in the House playing patty cakes when they got their ass handed to them in the actual negotiations, and they chose not to fight, they chose not to use their power, and so this is just marketing. So those are both possibilities. And we're always constructive here. So I'm gonna tell you one thing they could do where, and then I would ask you, Anna, if they did this, would you then say it's not performative and it's real? So if I'm Bernie, okay, you propose it. Well, you know it's not gonna pass because 8 Democrats voted against it last time in the Senate, let alone every Republican being opposed to it. So if you just propose it and then go home, well then I gotta be honest, it was useless. Anna wins the debate, okay? But if you propose it and then you go, okay, here's the 8 Democrats that voted against a minimum wage last time. Why did they do that? 2 of them are in Delaware. Delaware is a very blue state. Hey, voters of Delaware, you should vote these guys out. Bernie, you gonna do that? Because that would A, create tons of attention, and use that attention to notice, hey, why are Democrats who pretend to be in favor of the minimum wage actually against it? They voted against it, both Carper and Coons did. 8 different Democrats did. Okay, so if you shame them, then we would have an actual national conversation, because CNN would love Democrat on Democrat fighting, but you're doing it for the right reasons, to actually get a policy changed. You get the Democrats on board, and then you put pressure on the purple district Republicans in the House. You only need a couple of their votes. So I can show you an exact roadmap for how to get this done. Is Bernie gonna do it? He's your best chance, and the answer is very, 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 very unlikely, because he does not like to upset his Democratic colleagues.
Right, you have to use carrots and sticks. And the only time I see anyone in the Democratic Party using sticks is when corporate Democrats use sticks against progressive Democrats, which is why, look, she's the most notable, that's why she gets talked about the most, and she's made a lot of missteps, just keeping it real. Like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. I mean, the sticks used by corporate Democrats toward her worked perfectly to the point, I mean, she voted in favor of Congress intervening to stop the rail workers from going on strike. She voted against the rail workers in that case.
No, I know, believe me.
So like, I'm not interested, listen, I am not interested in creating opportunities for corporate Democrats to sign on to progressive legislation and pretend like they support that progressive legislation, knowing full well that because of the House Freedom Caucus and because of Republicans having control of the House of Representatives, it's never gonna pass. It's never gonna pass, but they want the cookies, they want the kudos. I'm not interested in the kudos, and I'm not interested in dealing with a party that, unlike the Republican Party, gotta keep it real, is so scared of any infighting, so scared of having to hold anyone accountable within their own party.
100%.
If there's no accountability and if there's no strategy, that's the main thing here. There's no strategy to get the actual proposals passed, then what are we having a conversation about?
Yeah, so last 2 things here. One is important for me and one's one devastating one for Anna. So performative can work. Remember when Cori Bush sat on the Capitol steps to make sure that they did not end the moratorium on the rent during COVID, and she won on that, at least for a period of time. Why? Because she brought attention to it and she embarrassed Biden, and Biden didn't want to be embarrassed, so he gave in. That's when performative is awesome. That's why I don't foreclose this as being a good thing. I think it could be a good thing. On the other hand, how much did they cave on $15 minimum wage when they could have fought? It's not theoretical, guys. There's actual facts. Even after they lost in the first COVID relief bill, while barely fighting, and by the way, the Young Turks audience had to shame Bernie Sanders into proposing it as an amendment. He was just gonna let Schumer take it out of the bill. That's just a fact. And by the way, Bernie Sanders won't come on any progressive shows anymore. I don't know, maybe he'll go on ones that promise him softballs. But he goes on Bill Maher, he goes on mainstream media shows, but he won't come on here because he knows we're gonna ask him, so what are you gonna do to pass it, Bernie? Is this just marketing, or do you actually mean it? So last thing is, okay, they lost on COVID relief bill, but Chuck Schumer said something unprecedented. And he said it to The Intercept. The article's public, you could all see it. Ryan Grimm interviewed him, and Chuck Schumer said, I will put $15 minimum wage in every bill going forward. That's a golden opportunity, golden. That's when progressives should step up and go, I agree with Chuck Schumer. It should go in every bill going forward, and we're not gonna vote for any of these bills unless it's got $15 minimum wage, and we have our beautiful ally Chuck Schumer with us. Now, why did Chuck Schumer do that? Because he was worried that AOC was gonna run against him in that Senate seat. But they took that power and leverage and they flushed it down the toilet. Not one progressive asked Chuck Schumer to ever put it in a bill again. That's a negligence and dereliction of duty beyond imagination. It breaks my heart to tell you that, but that's what happened. These guys, they don't know politics at all. So it's just incredibly dispiriting to see this happen. But by the way, to Bernie and to the Justice Democrats, I know you mean well. I'm not questioning your intent at all. So prove us wrong. Fight for these. The wealth tax is very, very difficult, but the minimum wage is incredibly popular. All you have to do is fight. Prove us wrong, fight. But my guess is Anna's right, you won't. It's just marketing.
And it's not, look, it's not aimless fighting, right? It's strategy. Develop a strategy. I don't even know if these people talk to one another.
No, that's why I mentioned the thing about Bernie not coming on. I don't care about guests. Guests don't do well, honestly, in our version of ratings. So it hurts us to have guests on, but we do it so you guys can learn. So, but if the reason I mention it is because we would ask Bernie, what's your plan, brother? And no one else in media ever asked that. And he doesn't, if he's got a plan, execute it, prove us wrong, humiliate us. Get it passed, and we'll love you forever. We'll apologize profusely and say you're the world's greatest politician. But you know what you have to do to pass it. You have to aggressively, not mildly, not go on CNN and just say it once. You have to aggressively challenge your Democratic colleagues, and you will not do it under penalty of law. That's why nothing ever passes that's progressive.
An update on Mitch McConnell's health when we return from the break.
All right, back on TYT. Let's go to YouTube members first. Jay McFarland says, I've been a member for 2 months now, thanks to being gifted as a stay-at-home mom. It means a lot to be a member. Thank you for having me. Love you all. Well, Jay, great to have you, and thank you everybody for all the wonderful gifting. In fact, Athletes LLC did it again. Another 20 Young Turks memberships, total American heroes. All right, we go to Twitch. Joe47771 says, I agree with Cenk, better something than nothing. And then this is an awesome comment. Lord Percocet writes in, I started saying I get my news from TYT on dating apps, and wow, boy, is it good at weeding out the wackies. So that's an interesting tip from a Young Turks viewer. So if you say you get your news from TYT, that's it. You won't have to bother with any right-wing jerks coming to bother you on these dating apps. So now, Samantha GK wrote in, I'm gonna keep asking until she replies. Margarine Green, you here? Because we got the theory that she's a member and watching Damage Report. And it's pretty good theory. Anyway, Dave Schmidt 311, thank you for gifting 2 tier 1 subs on Twitch. We appreciate you. Twitch Micro says, that's why I watch TYT. You'll never see Anderson Cooper being honest about what will actually happen to Trump or any other rich POS. And so guys, you know that the mainstream media is never gonna tell you that the rich and the elites have an enormous advantage when it's super obvious to the rest of us. Why? Because they're the rich and the elites. That's just a fact. All right, speaking of membership, look, our impacts page is a ton of stuff you guys did. We worked together on a lot of this, including the activism. We did a protest about Goldman Sachs. That's me and Michael there in the middle a while back in Washington. That was terrific. I wound up getting arrested in a civil rights, in fact, the largest civil rights arrest protest ever in American history, and that was to get money out of politics. And so many, the reason it was the largest because so many of you showed up. You guys make this possible. Check out tyt.com/impacts for all the impacts you guys have had. And membership makes all of that possible. And thank you to everybody who upgrades or joins at the higher levels to allow us to keep the basic membership at $4.99 a month, basically a price of coffee, at least on the coast. Podcasting network includes the Bituation Room with Francesca Fiorentini. Check out all of our podcasts, including Young Turks and all the other shows. And then I want to tell you about Dr. Richie's new book. He's of course the host of Indisputable, and you can find it on Amazon or by scanning that QR code. The title of the book is Ancient Egyptian Mastery of Quantum Physics, Vibratory Frequency, and the Geometric Sciences, an overview of complex scientific applications in ancient cultures. If you're wondering, did Dr. Richie actually write that? Yes, he did. The doctor is actually for a number of doctorates, including in sciences like physics. The dude's incredible. So check out his book when you get a chance, and we'll be right back. back on TYT. Jen Canano with you guys forward.
All right, let's get into the Mitch McConnell story.
Do you have anybody in mind to replace you when you're no longer the conference leader?
I think he just walked away. Yeah.
Looks like Senator Mitch McConnell is having a rough go at things, and he certainly did not take kindly to a reporter's question about whether there is a replacement in mind for his position in the Senate. And of course, that follows a pretty scary moment during a press conference where Mitch McConnell seemed to have some sort of medical issue. We don't have many details about what transpired, but we do have the video. Here's what happened.
This week has been good bipartisan cooperation and a string of
Okay, Mitch. Anything else you want to say, or should we just go back to your office? Do you want to say anything else to the press? Let's go back.
Go ahead, John.
I'll take it back. Let's go back to you.
Go ahead, John.
Go ahead, John.
So again, we don't know exactly what happened there. It looked like he might have had some kind of neurological episode. And he has been suffering from a lot of falls lately. We'll get into the details on that. But a few minutes after that happened, he walked back to the press conference by himself and continued answering some questions. Asked about his health, he said he was fine. Asked whether he is fully able to do his job, he said yeah. Asked about the episode, an aide pointed to McConnell's saying, "I'm fine." But the aide added that McConnell felt lightheaded and stepped away for a moment. He came back to handle Q&A, which, as everyone observed, was sharp, the aide said.
Was it?
Yeah, so.
Yeah, I have strong feelings about this. So look, everybody's frustrated that all of our politicians' average age appears to be 198, but nobody ever tells you why. Is it just because they're awesome and so they just are staying around forever because the American people love them? No, they're staying around because they have the most donor money, and people with the candidates with more money win 95% of the time. Now, yeah, but why does that favor the old? It favors the old because companies have already gotten a return on investment on these guys. So if it's a new candidate, ExxonMobil doesn't know if they'll use the bribe in the right way, if they'll take the bribe and then vote with them or against them. Whereas with Mitch McConnell, they know with 100% certainty, Mitch is gonna deliver for them. So they want him to stay around as long as possible. He's a safe bet. When they invest into him with their bribes, they're gonna get fantastic return, and they have. To be fair to Mitch McConnell, he's a very good politician, or was previously, and has gotten the rich trillions of dollars in tax cuts. He's the best investment they ever made. But if you're a Democrat and you're getting smug right now, don't, because Nancy Pelosi is taking just as many bribes as Mitch McConnell has. And if you think it's a bribe when all these companies give it to Mitch McConnell, but not a bribe when they give it to Nancy Pelosi, you're crazy, okay? So, and yet tons and tons of millions of people believe that because mainstream media told them, oh, Democrats are angels. Now, which leads us to Feinstein. I'm gonna skip ahead to this. So Senator Feinstein's a Democrat from California. She has significant cognitive difficulties. She's, whatever you wanna call it, Alzheimer's, dementia, I don't know the specific situation, but she has lost all of her mental faculties. It's a national embarrassment that she's still pretending to be a senator and that the people around her are pretending to be a senator. So they're doing a roll call vote, and a roll call vote, you just say A or nay, that's it.
And we have a video of that.
Yeah, and there's no speeches. So this is what happened instead, watch.
Senator Feinstein.
Say aye. Pardon me?
Aye.
Yeah.
Just say.
I would like to support a yes vote on this. It provides $823 billion. That's an increase of $26 billion for the Department of Defense. And it funds priorities submitted.
Yeah, just say aye.
Okay, just.
Great.
Aye.
Thank you.
Same exact situation as the Republicans. And here they are, back to back, both like, and the donors wheel them out and they go, I give everything to the donors. And they're voting on a defense bill where they're gonna rob us blind. And Mitch McConnell, yeah, okay, now move them along. Who's moving them along? Who's moving them along? Who's telling them to say aye? The donors control them 100%. That's why they don't mind. They're like, who cares? What do you want, a senator that thinks? No, donors don't want a senator who thinks. Donors want a senator who takes the check and do as they're told. That's why McConnell and Feinstein have been perfect for them for their whole careers.
Look, I think it's important for you to give a little more context, right? Like, it sounds too conspiratorial. In the case of Feinstein, I think that you're definitely making a good case, especially when it comes to what would happen if Feinstein or those around Feinstein allowed her to step down and resign before her term is up. What would happen then, Cenk?
So what would happen is Gavin Newsom would have to appoint the next senator from California. And that person would have a tremendous advantage in the upcoming elections for that seat because they would then be the incumbent. And he has promised to nominate an African-American woman. Barbara Lee is running. Perfect. The problem is she's a progressive. And the donors don't want a progressive. They want a corporate stooge like Feinstein. I'm curious what your criticism is because McConnell is the biggest donor servant of all time.
I don't have criticism. I just wanted you to provide more context to strengthen your argument. I think it's the same case with McConnell, but you have very specific details on how this impacts that Senate seat in California.
Yeah, 100%. And look, in the case of McConnell, he's the one that gets everybody the goodies. So when Pelosi and McConnell raised $1 billion, they don't just keep it. They're not Donald Trump. Donald Trump would just keep it. No, they hand it out to all the Republicans and all the Democrats in their different bodies, right, in the House and the Senate. And so that's why they're the leaders, because they are the ones who funnel the bribes to all the politicians. So now that's why the Republicans go, as much as McConnell seems like he can't function anymore, and I can't believe they brought him back. And I can't believe they continue that press conference. Take the guy to the hospital. I mean, who does this for 20 seconds and you think he's fine? He's not fine. Look, I cut off Anna earlier. He's fallen over and over and over again recently. He fell in March, he fell in Finland. He had a concussion, he broke his ribs. And the whole Congress has turned into a weekend at Bernie's. And when I say the donors wheeled him in, Anna's right to say, like, let's be clear. It's not a dude, it's not a conspiracy, it's not a guy named Bilderberg or anything like that. No, they're just, the system is built around incumbency and protection of the powerful. And so that's why they don't want McConnell to go, because he's the guy who collects all the checks. So that's his own staff that's like, he's okay. And the other senators who get the money from him, he's like, he's okay. Same thing with Feinstein. The Democrats know that she's not competent. She can't remember a single thing. Schumer tells her one thing, she forgets it a day later. She said that she was gonna finally step down. That's why they're having that Senate race without her, obviously. And then the next day she forgot she was stepping down when reporters asked her. National embarrassment.
Yeah, look, why don't we take our final break of the show? When we come back, two giant stories, one having to do with Nancy Mace making a really interesting decision to comment about her sex life during a prayer breakfast. And then later we'll also talk about an ongoing feud among conservatives about the trad wife trend. What does that mean and what is the feud? We'll give you that and more when we come back.
All right, back on TYT. Let's go to YouTube Super Chat. Harry W. Pedroso wrote in. Hello, Anna and Cenk. Thank you for being honest. Thank you, Anna, for taking on or talking about controversial themes for the left. Thank you, Cenk, for always supporting her. Please keep talking about climate change. So several people wrote in about climate change, and guys, if we were only covering the things that are the most important stories in the news, we would basically only cover money and politics and climate change. What's happening right now in climate change is disastrous. We've got a story coming up about it, but it's a disaster that again, we might not be able to fix. Let me see if I can find the other. Yeah, here it is. Otaku Dragon wrote in, did you see that the Atlantic Ocean current could collapse as early as 2025 due to climate change? Screw those corrupt oil barons who hit everything. And what those oil executives don't understand is that no force on earth will be able to contain public anger once the devastation begins. So we'll come out here and we'll tell you guys, don't do anything physical, don't do anything violent. With the right wing will not be as kind, right? But the anger, once the devastation begins, will be unprecedented. And those oil executives think they got mansions large enough, and same with the politicians. I don't think so. And I wish it weren't the case, and I hope it doesn't happen, but they're playing with fire for the whole planet and for themselves. Thomas Daniel says, Cenk, you say aliens have been here, but the last time I checked, they seek intelligent life. I know, right? If they landed, they'd be like, We'll talk more about it in the postgame. We are going to. tyt.com/show to become a member. Being me 24 wrote in, making fun of those that disagree, and everyone that disagrees is wrong. You two enable each other in all the wrong ways. That's not true in a couple of ways. Number one, Anna often criticizes me for making fun of Republican voters. So keep watching, you'll see that happen. Second of all, no, we're honest. And yes, sometimes the Republicans do crazy stuff and I make fun of them. Boo-hoo. Now, why do I say boo-hoo? Are your feelings hurt? Are you just as mad at Republicans when they call Democrats child molesters and baby killers and every awful thing in the world? So once a progressive fights back, all of a sudden you're worried about their feelings? When Republicans have never, ever, ever worried about Democratic feelings in my entire life. But having said that, you know how honest we are. You know we rip their face off. And every once in a while, more than any other left-wing show, we'll give Republican voters credit for this or that, depending on the situation. So when we give them credit, you know we're being honest. Go ahead, find another show, you won't. Patrick Miller wrote in, can any of the TYT fans help phone bank for the Ohio special election on the 8th of August? It's to vote no on issue 1. Voting yes would cause a 60% majority to pass legislation in the future. That's very important because that's basically both undemocratic proposal by the Republicans and would get rid of abortion in Ohio. So Patrick's absolutely right. And he said, I also work with Progressive Victory. I forgot to say that. Look, I love that you guys are fighting back in all the ways that you can, and don't ever lose hope and keep fighting. Patrick, we appreciate you. And I had other great ones, but I'm out of time. We'll be back. All right, back on TYT, Cenk and Anna with you guys. Casper.
All right. There is an ongoing rift among conservatives having to do with the treatment of women, and it is a fascinating story to say the least. So apparently, women influencers on the right are caught in a massive disagreement about how women are portrayed by some conservatives. Specifically, they're arguing about how much they're allowed to push conservative, misogynistic expectations onto women, and some of them are really misogynistic, even more than what we've seen before. And to be quite honest with you, I agree with those who argue that the most extreme among them are doing it for attention and as part of a branding exercise and a grift. But let me fill you in on what the details are. So Media Matters publishes a lengthy and comprehensive account of this debate among conservatives, okay? And here are the major players. So there are the women who are getting a little irritated and uncomfortable with all the misogyny, and those women include Turning Point USA's Alex Clark, Blaze TV's Ali Beth Stuckey, Blaze host and Turning Point USA contributor Lauren Chen, and Michaela Peterson, who is the daughter of Jordan Peterson. And to be clear, these women have not held back in some of their, I'll be generous and say, stereotypical and traditional views of women. For instance, Stuckey has said that she believes wives should submit to their husbands as to the Lord, even though that word submission can be really scary. Chen argued in a February video that it is important to listen to what a man might want in a woman, adding that being independent and career focused are things that essentially make a woman into a man.
Okay, I want to just pause to let everybody understand. Those are the moderates.
Those are the moderates, right?
We're going to get to the right-wing fanatics in a second, but those are the ones that are pushing back against the right-wing fanatics. I don't actually think they're moderate. Those quotes are insane.
I mean, look, I'd like to see a little more context into Chen's comments, right? Because I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing to listen to what your partner wants. Like,
no.
Yeah, but the second half of it, where like being career focused or independent basically turns a woman into a man, I disagree with that, right?
I don't just disagree with that.
Yeah.
I think that's mental. Working is only a man can do it. So if a woman does it, you become a man. So
I got news
women
for you.
should never work.
Most women don't have the choice. Most women do not have the choice.
That's also true, but she works, and why don't you go home, go make a sandwich? So those are the so-called moderates in the right wing, and they're nutsos. I'm gonna give you 3 brackets in a second, but go ahead.
Then there's Clark, who argued at a recent Turning Point USA event for women that the feminist movement is in large part to blame for the fracturing of the traditional home, where women were coerced outside of their natural roles as mothers into the workforce. I would argue that the inequality and stagnant wages that stagnated beginning in the 1970s, which led to pressure for both parties to work and bring in dual income, is part of the problem here. But I mean, no, but seriously, let's just stop for a second. I just want them to answer that question. If we reverted to a society where women weren't allowed to work anymore, how exactly would that household survive given what wages look like today? Seriously.
Yeah, no, Anna, as you were saying that, I just realized this is, again, the Anna rule. They're distracting you from the actual issue, which is that everyone has to go work, men, women, etc. You both have to go work because otherwise you can't make enough money because corporations have taken everything from us. But they're getting the men and the women to fight each other instead of noticing that their wages did not keep up with productivity and that their wages should be $10 per hour higher than they are today. Right. Why? Because they're saying, no, the real issue is Christianity and how women should stay at home.
That's
and feminism.
The problem. Right.
No, that's a giant distraction from the issue of the corporate robbery that's happening.
Yeah, and look, I'm just gonna. The biggest change that some of you might have noticed with me is that I'm done with the identitarian garbage. I'm done with it. It is a giant distraction, and the more we focus on it, and it's definitely very obvious to me when it comes to the left, the people who are supposed to be fighting for a better economic system, better economic conditions, better working conditions, all of that stuff pushed aside. Let's focus on the identitarian stuff. And the identitarian stuff by nature divides us and leads to more fights, more conflict, even among us. But that's the point. Anyway, sorry, that's a little bit of a tangent, but I had to get that out off my chest.
It's relevant in this case.
It's super relevant in this case, yes.
All right, let me just do this and then let you get back to telling the whole story. Look, there's 3 categories here, and I'm partly doing it in the middle here because it's confusing. So there's the normal people, most of America, that goes, hey, if you want to be a stay-at-home mom and you can afford it, and you want to dress up like it's the 1950s and stuff, we love it. Have at it. I think Anna's dress right there is from the 1950s, right? So that's called freedom. No one disagrees with that, okay? Then there's a second bucket. Those are the conservative Christians, the quotes that we just read from you. Like, women, come on, are they really supposed to be at work? Can they really handle? That's a man's job. That kind of nonsense, right? And I think that's loathsome and horrible. But okay, we have a culture difference. They think, no, the Bible says the woman is inferior and must submit to the husband. I don't agree. Okay, we'll fight over that. Now there's a third category, these trad wives and the manosphere and all these bizarre things. And they're even more extreme. That women are super inferior and they're just basically there to provide sex for men, etc. Now, that category was inevitable for the same reasons that Anna's talking about on the left. Because no matter how extreme any position is, you have to go more extreme.
It's not enough. It's not enough.
Because then you're going to get to say outrageous things which draw attention, You're gonna attack people on your own side, draw even more attention, right? And then you're gonna say you're the most pure. Manna from heaven, then you're making money, okay? In social, and so you see it on the right in this case, and yes, that happens on the left too. And everyone who's the most extreme then says, oh, I'm the only pure one. You should watch me, you should listen to me, you should follow me on Substack. You should do this, oh, by the way, give me money because I'm the most extreme, I mean, most pure. So that's part of the phenomenon. But when you go most extreme on the right, you go really extreme. And that's why they're having this fight now.
So just to reiterate, a trad wife is like this traditional idea of what a woman should be, right? A stay-at-home mom, a wife, dresses like she's in the 1950s. That is the stereotypical preferred version of womanhood for those who are pushing the ideology of the trad wife, right? With that said, there is an online community of trad wives and aspiring trad wives that post stuff like this. You guys do know that stay-at-home moms in the 1950s were like known for constantly being high.
Well, actually, I didn't know that, but that sounds fun.
Like that. I mean, anyway, but let's move on. So the influencers we mentioned have grievances with the whole trad wife thing. So in May, Clark referred to conservatives idolizing the trad wife movement as problematic, and her guest Becca Merkel agreed, saying, "quote I don't think that's the 50s. I don't think that the 50s were giving us, the perfect model for what women should be like." I don't know if Becca here was referring to what I was thinking, which is getting high all the time, just to handle like the situation and the lack of freedom and independence. But
by the way, that video was like standard fare conservatives, standard fare. It wasn't the extreme version. So like submitting, the women having to submit to men is like very mainstream right-wing thinking these days. But if you don't know what the problem with the 1950s was, women weren't doing it by choice. They didn't have a choice. They were not allowed to get jobs. They were not allowed to go outside the house. And by the way, the part that nobody talks about is they would often get beat, physically beat by their husbands, slapped, punched, kicked, etc. Is that the 50s we want to go back to? Why do you think they kept them in line? Just by suggestion, right? So no, I don't want to go back to that.
Stuckey also tweeted in May, the online trad wife trend isn't biblical marriage. It's narcissists cosplaying as 1950s husbands and housewives with a special, strange emphasis on how awful women are. It's not Christian and it's not really conservative either. And Stuckey isn't just referring to the trad wives in that tweet. She's also specifically calling out an extremely misogynistic subdivision of that group called the manosphere. And if you thought, what you've heard from the trad wife component is bad, wait till you get a load of Pearl Davis, someone who I've seen on Twitter. Look, here's what Pearl's whole shtick is, okay? BS. Saying all sorts of controversial, crazy things to get as much attention as possible. I don't believe that she believes the things that she's saying, but she does say crazy things. So Davis has defended white nationalist Nick Fuentes and hosted violent misogynist Andrew Tate. Davis has varyingly claimed that women cry abuse for everything, and we've actually lost the meaning of abuse, and argued against women's right to vote. So look, I don't know. She might actually really love Nick Fuentes. I don't know about that. But when she advocates for women losing the right to vote, does she really believe that? Really? Does she really believe that? Davis has argued that if you believe in divorce, then you should not get married, and has attacked women for being what she describes as
crappy wives.
Crappy wives, which she defines as not submitting to, exercising for, or sleeping with their husbands.
Okay, so guys, the normal bad guy conservatives that we described earlier are now attacking this Pearl Davis lady, and they're right. And that's the great irony. Even though I just told you how much I disagree with the mainstream conservative crazy thought, right? Pearl Davis is an obvious grifter. So what's the grift? I'm gonna go to be more pure than you. I'm gonna attack you. All the things I described before. But who is she appealing to? Where is she gonna get her money, her audience? She's appealing to right-wing men, and especially misogynistic right-wing men. And there's always going to be a market for some sort of turncoat. So she's a woman saying, oh yeah, women are inferior to you guys. Women shouldn't be allowed to vote. Women are not competent to be able to vote, etc. So misogynistic right-wing men are like, yes, see, even a woman says it. Even a woman says it, right? And so I don't know where she gets her scam. I don't know if she does Substack or whatever, Rumble or whatever the hell she does. And that's how she makes money. So I have no idea if she believes it, but if it wasn't her, it would be another woman. They would go, well, somebody's gonna step up to do that scam. Candace Owens is really a slightly more sophisticated version of this, but not that sophisticated at all. She's like, I'm a woman and women suck. I'm black and black culture sucks. This is the oldest grift in right-wing history.
Listen, let's just not lose sight of the fact that we're talking about whether it's the moderate conservative women or the extremists like Pearl Davis. They're all making money as women working. Why are you guys working? Why are you guys working? Especially you, Pearl. How much money are you bringing in? Why don't you shut up and get offline? Okay, why don't you, are you married?
She's not even married, doesn't have kids.
Do you have any kids? Oh my God. You're not married, you don't have kids?
Why don't you go get pregnant?
Who gave you permission to work?
Why don't you go find a man and submit to him and understand your role as the inferior person and shut up about it?
Honey.
Remember the 1950s when you weren't allowed to say a goddamn thing? And you had to sit in the corner of the house? Go make a goddamn sandwich.
Also, can you please put yourself together, honey? I mean, you never have any lipstick on, no rouge, no nothing. Put yourself together. How could you appear on camera looking like that?
Not our ideology, your ideology.
I mean, it's pathetic to say the least. So a few back and forths I want to share with you. Here's an example of a tweet from Pearl Davis with Michaela Peterson responding to it. Remember, Peterson is the more moderate one in this situation. The same women that say, I hate women, will call me autistic, attack my looks, and flat out lie about what I talk about, shame, insult, guilt, and need to be right. By the way, all she does is guilt other women for living a lifestyle that she allegedly doesn't agree with.
Gaslighting 101.
Yeah, Peterson responds with, I said you hate women because almost everything you tweet is hateful toward women, which is true, by the way. It's not factual, it doesn't help anyone, and it's spiteful and vitriolic. Encouraging women to have kids younger and not sleep around is beneficial. Insulting women is not. You do the latter. Yeah.
Yeah, and so, look, like I said, there's one other aspect of the grift here that she's copying that I've seen also on the left, which is attack people, and then when they say, hey, don't do that, go, why are you attacking me? I'm the victim. You see that tweet where she's like pretending to be the victim after she attacked everyone else? And you've got some frauds on the left that do the same exact thing. They'll viciously attack people, and then when you tweak them back, like, oh, I'm a victim. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, and like another example of Pearl Davis putting out all sorts of divisive tweets. She said something about how at first it was 25-year-old chicks are hotter than 35-year-old chicks, and that led to a big controversy and debate online. And then after that, this was so disgusting. She tweeted something about how like 16-year-old chicks are hotter than 26-year-old chicks, 26-year-old.
Yeah, because it doesn't matter. You're just trying to get attention, right? And you like the worse human being you are, the more attention you're gonna get. That's what media has devolved to at this point. But look, there's only one silver lining in this story, which is that even like what I consider crazy right-wingers, but now have become moderate right-wingers, are going enough. Like we were crazy enough. When you go crazier than us, we're gonna draw the line.
I'm curious how it's gonna play out. I really am, right? Because there's very little pushback on our side when it comes to some of the extreme stuff. But there's a growing chorus of women who are pushing back against the more extreme misogyny in their side. I don't know how it's gonna play out. Which side wins?
Well, I'll tell you what's gonna happen. For people who are actually trying to get something done in the world, we're just gonna go straight forward and we're gonna give you whatever it is, the honest news, trying to get positive change, etc. That's what we do, right? But for everyone else, both on the grifters on the right and then fake left, etc., they're just gonna factionalize to no end. Everyone's gonna fight each other because they just care about money. They don't care about passing any laws, they don't care about policies, they don't care about the American people, they don't care about men, they don't care about women, right? All they care about is the money, Lebowski. So the fighting gets them more money. So they're just gonna fight, fight, fight. And the good news is they're starting to fight each other. And yes, the right wing will shred one another because they're already more vicious than the left. And they will, the only disadvantage the left has is has more orthodoxy. And like, if anyone disagrees with the orthodoxy, people say that's not acceptable. At least with the right wing, they're free to disagree all they like. Anyways, disastrous media ecosystem, and that's where we are. All right, in the bonus episode, we have amazing stories for you, including a Republican bragging about sex at a prayer breakfast, and UFOs. Are aliens actually here? Kind of. I vote yes, but kind of. We'll explain. tyt.com/join or hit the join button below. We'll see you there.
Hey everyone, Matteo Scarapore here, author of Black Buck, which is Shop TYT's first fiction book ever. I'm honored. So, Black Buck is about a young man named Darren who's living in Bed-Stuy, Brooklyn.